I knew something was wrong the moment I walked into our apartment that evening. Tyler had texted that we needed to talk about our relationship, words that rarely precede good news. What I hadn't expected was to find him sitting on our couch with practiced solemnity, as if he'd been rehearsing his expression in the mirror. Mia. He looked up when I entered, his voice carrying that particular tone people use when they're trying to sound regretful but can't quite hide their excitement about what comes next. I'm glad you're home. I set my bag down, still wearing my coat. Your text seemed important. Tyler nodded, patting the couch beside him. I remained standing. I've been doing a lot of thinking, he began, using the careful cadence of someone working from a mental script. We've been together for 3 years, and they've been great years, but I feel like we've been growing in different directions lately. I studied him as he spoke, the way he wouldn't quite meet my eyes, the rehearsed quality of his phrasing, the slight bouncing of his right leg that always betrayed his impatience. Tyler had never been particularly skilled at disguising his emotions. I think we should end things, he continued. It's not fair to either of us to continue when my heart isn't fully in it anymore. There it was, the breakup speech I'd been suspecting might come for weeks. What Tyler didn't know was that I'd already found evidence of his affair with my friend Amber 2 weeks earlier. I'd seen their messages when his phone lit up while he was in the shower. I hadn't confronted him immediately, choosing instead to watch and gather information while I processed my own feelings and planned my next steps. Is there someone else? I asked, not because I needed confirmation but because I wanted to see if he'd tell the truth. Tyler hesitated, his eyes dropping momentarily before meeting mine with manufactured sincerity. No, of course not. This is about us, about our relationship having run its course. I just think we both deserve a chance to find what truly makes us happy. The lie settled between us, adding another layer to the betrayal. I had expected it, but hearing it directly still stung in a way I hadn't fully anticipated. I see, I said simply. Tyler looked momentarily confused by my calm reaction. He'd clearly prepared for tears, for pleading, for the emotional outburst that would allow him to position himself as the reasonable one making the difficult but necessary decision. That's it? He asked, unable to hide his surprise. You're not upset? I shrugged, finally removing my coat. What would be the point? You've clearly made your decision. His brow furrowed slightly. This wasn't following his imagined script. Well, yes, I have. But we were together for 3 years, Mia. I thought you might have more to say. What would you like me to say, Tyler? That I'm devastated? That I'll fight for our relationship? Would that make this easier for you? He had the grace to look slightly embarrassed. No, of course not. I care about you, and I want to make sure you're okay. I appreciate the concern, I replied, my tone neutral. When will you be moving out? The abrupt pivot to logistics threw him further off balance. I haven't really thought about that part yet. I guess I can start looking for a place this week? That would be good. The lease is in my name, as you know. Tyler nodded, looking increasingly wrong-footed. Right, yeah. I can probably be out by the weekend if I find somewhere quickly. That works for me. I moved toward the hallway that led to our bedroom, my bedroom now. I'm going to take a shower. We can talk more about the practical details later if you'd like. I left him sitting there, his carefully prepared breakup moment not delivering the emotional validation he'd clearly been expecting. As the hot water ran over me, I allowed myself the first tears, not for the relationship I was losing, which had clearly been broken for some time, but for the friendship that had been betrayed alongside it. Amber had been one of my closest friends for 5 years, someone I'd confided in, traveled with, trusted completely. The betrayal from her hurt more deeply than Tyler's. Men had disappointed me before, but Amber had been a constant, someone I'd never thought would choose a man over our friendship, much less my own boyfriend. After my shower, I dressed in comfortable clothes and returned to the living room. Tyler was on his phone, texting rapidly, Amber, no doubt, updating her on how the breakup had gone. When he noticed me, he quickly set the phone down. Feel better? He asked, attempting casual concern. Much, I replied. Have you thought more about the moving timeline? I'd appreciate if you could be out by Sunday. That gives you 4 days. Tyler nodded, though I could see irritation beginning to replace his confusion at my practical approach. He'd expected to be the one in control of this situation, offering comfort to my distress, perhaps even suggesting we could still be friends once enough time had passed. Sunday should work, he said. I might leave some things here until I find a permanent place, if that's okay? 2 weeks maximum for any remaining items, I replied. After that, anything left becomes mine to dispose of as I see fit. He looked like he wanted to object to my businesslike tone but thought better of it. That's fair. The next few days passed in a strange dance of avoidance and practical negotiations. Tyler spent most of his time out of the apartment, presumably with Amber, returning only to pack his things or sleep on the couch. I maintained my routine, working from home during the day, going to my yoga class in the evenings, cooking meals for one instead of two. On Friday, Tyler informed me he'd found a short-term sublet and would be completely moved out by Saturday afternoon. I thanked him for the update and continued working on my laptop, my calm efficiency clearly unsettling him more than any dramatic confrontation would have. What neither Tyler nor Amber knew was that I had spent these days meticulously gathering information. I had screenshots of their conversations from Tyler's tablet, which he'd carelessly left logged into his accounts. I had the timeline of their affair, which had apparently begun 2 months earlier at a party I'd been too sick to attend. Most importantly, I had messages between Tyler and his best friend Eric discussing both women, messages that revealed Tyler's true character in ways that would be impossible to explain away. Saturday arrived, and with it came Tyler's final move out. He'd enlisted Eric to help, and they worked efficiently, carrying boxes and furniture down to the rented truck parked outside. I stayed out of their way, working in the kitchen on my laptop. As they prepared to take the final load, Tyler approached me, keys in hand. "So, I guess this is it," he said, setting his apartment key on the counter. I looked up from my screen. "I guess it is. I know this isn't how either of us pictured things ending," he continued, seemingly determined to extract some emotional response from me before leaving. "But I hope eventually we can look back on the good times without bitterness." I closed my laptop and gave him my full attention. "Tyler, I'm not bitter. I'm disappointed, yes, but mostly I'm just ready to move forward. I hope you find what you're looking for." He studied my face, perhaps searching for signs of the emotional devastation he'd expected. Finding none, he nodded awkwardly. "Thanks. You too, Mia. Take care of yourself." "You as well." I returned to my laptop, effectively dismissing him. With a final glance around the apartment that had been ours, Tyler left. I heard his footsteps receding down the hallway, followed by the distant sound of the elevator doors opening and closing. Only then did I allow myself a deep, shuddering breath. It was over, the relationship, the pretense, the daily performance of not knowing what I knew. I sat motionless for several minutes, letting the silence of the apartment envelop me, acknowledging the end of this chapter before I would begin the next. Then I opened my laptop again and navigated to my email. The message I'd drafted days ago was still there, waiting to be sent. I reviewed it one last time, verifying that all attachments were properly included, that my tone remained factual and unemotional throughout. The email was addressed to Amber. The subject line read simply, "Information you should have before moving forward." My finger hovered over the send button as I considered the consequences one final time. This wasn't about revenge, though I couldn't deny a certain satisfaction in knowing what would likely happen once Amber saw the evidence I'd compiled. This was about truth, something both she and I deserved, however painful. I clicked send. The email contained no angry accusations, no emotional pleas. It began with a simple statement: "I know about your relationship with Tyler, and I've moved on. But there are things you should be aware of before you invest further in him." What followed were carefully organized screenshots, conversations between Tyler and Eric where he compared us, complaining about what he called my emotional neediness while praising Amber's chill vibe and low-maintenance personality. Messages where he admitted to Eric that he was keeping his options open even as he pursued Amber. Comments about her body that were objectifying at best, degrading at worst. Most damning was a recent exchange from just 2 days ago. "Eric, so you're really doing this? Moving in with Amber right after leaving Mia?" Tyler, "Not immediately. Playing it like I need my own space after the breakup. Don't want to seem too eager." Eric, "Smart. How'd Mia take it?" Tyler, "Surprisingly well. Almost too well. No tears, no drama. Kind of disappointing tbh." Eric, "LOL, you wanted the ego boost of her begging you to stay?" Tyler, "Wouldn't have changed anything, but yeah, a little appreciation for what she's losing wouldn't have hurt." Eric, cold, "Man. So what's the real timeline with Amber?" Tyler, "Thinking I'll do the solo thing for a month or so, let Mia get over it, then make it official with Amber. She's been pushing to tell people, but I convinced her to keep it quiet until things settle." Eric, "She knows she's not the first girl you've cheated with?" Tyler, "Hell no. What she doesn't know won't hurt her." I included no commentary with these screenshots. They spoke for themselves. The final paragraph of my email was simple and direct. "I'm not sending this out of spite or to cause drama. You made your choices, as did Tyler. But you're making those choices without all the information, and that doesn't seem fair to you. What you do with this information is entirely your decision. I won't be contacting either of you again, and I wish you well in whatever path you choose." With the email sent, I closed my laptop and began the process of reclaiming my space. I moved furniture, rearranged decorations, and ordered takeout from my favorite restaurant, one Tyler had always complained about. I opened a bottle of wine I'd been saving and toasted to new beginnings in my newly peaceful apartment. Sunday passed quietly as I continued settling into my solo life. I ignored the occasional buzz of my phone, not yet ready to engage with the concerned messages from mutual friends who'd undoubtedly heard about the breakup by now. That could wait until I'd had more time to process everything on my own terms. Monday morning arrived with a flurry of activity as I prepared for my first day back at the office after working remotely the previous week. As I was gathering my things to leave, my phone buzzed with an incoming text from an unexpected source. "Eric. Holy shit, Mia. The apocalypse happened. Call me if you want details. No judgment if you don't." I stared at the message, curiosity battling with my desire for clean separation from everything connected to Tyler. Curiosity won. I called Eric while walking to my car. "That was fast," he answered. "Didn't think you'd actually call." "I almost didn't," I admitted. "What happened?" "Amber dumped Tyler's ass. Hard. Like, nuclear-level rejection." Eric sounded almost impressed. "He showed up at my place at midnight with all his stuff. He's crashing on my couch looking like someone ran over his dog." I unlocked my car but remained standing beside it. "I take it she saw my email." "Oh yeah." Forwarded the whole thing to him with just 3 words, "We're done. Goodbye." He's been trying to explain it away, calling and texting non-stop, but she's completely ghosted him. A complicated mix of emotions washed through me, vindication without true pleasure, closure without celebration. "I see. He knows it was you, obviously." He's bouncing between furious and pathetic. "Keep saying you had no right to interfere." "I didn't interfere," I replied calmly. "I just provided information. They both made their own choices." Eric was quiet for a moment. For what it's worth, I told him he was being an idiot. "With both of you." He didn't listen. "Thanks for the solidarity, but it doesn't really matter now. It's done." "Yeah," Eric agreed. "It's done. And for what it's worth, I think you handled it like a badass. No drama, no scenes, just strategic truth bombs." I couldn't help a small smile at his description. "I should get going. I have a meeting in 30 minutes. "Sure. Just thought you should know how it played out." "I appreciate that. Take care, Eric." "You too, Mia. And hey, sorry about how everything went down. Tyler's my friend, but he was wrong about this one." After hanging up, I sat in my car for a moment, absorbing this final piece of information. Tyler had lost both women in the span of a weekend. The carefully constructed transition he'd planned had collapsed entirely, leaving him alone on his friend's couch, facing consequences he clearly hadn't anticipated. He had expected tears when he left me for her. He had expected to control the narrative, to be the one who decided when and how information was shared. He hadn't expected what I sent to her inbox, the unvarnished truth that allowed Amber to make an informed decision about the man she was involving herself with. As I drove to work, I felt the first genuine lightness I'd experienced in weeks. Not because Tyler was suffering, his emotional state was no longer my concern, but because I had handled the situation with integrity and self-respect. I hadn't lashed out emotionally or engaged in public drama. I'd simply ensured that truth prevailed, then stepped back to continue building my own life. My phone buzzed with another text as I parked at my office building. This one from Amber. "I know you probably don't want to hear from me, and I don't expect forgiveness. But thank you for the email. I'm sorry for everything." I didn't respond immediately. Forgiveness might come eventually, but Amber was right, I wasn't ready yet. The betrayal from her had cut deeper than Tyler's, and that wound would take longer to heal. But as I walked into my office building, I felt firmly in control of my own story for the first time in months. Tyler had thought I'd crumble when he left. Instead, I'd reclaimed my power by refusing to follow his script, by responding with dignity rather than desperation, and by ensuring that the truth spoke for itself. He thought I'd cry when he left me for her. He didn't expect what I sent to her inbox, and in the end, that made all the difference. 3 weeks after Tyler moved out, I was finally finding my rhythm in my newly solo life. The apartment felt different, emptier in some ways, but more peaceful in others. I'd rearranged furniture, bought new bedding, and painted the accent wall in the living room a deep teal that Tyler had always vetoed. Small changes that helped transform the space from ours to definitively mine. My phone buzzed with a text from my sister, Layla. "Still on for dinner tonight? 7 p.m. at Vito's?" Absolutely, I replied. See you then. Layla had been my rock through everything, the first person I called after discovering Tyler's betrayal, the one who helped me think through my options calmly instead of reacting impulsively. Unlike our other friends who seemed unsure how to navigate the aftermath, she had no conflicted loyalties or awkward ties to manage. I arrived at Vito's a few minutes early and secured a table in the back corner, our preferred spot for conversations that required some privacy. When Layla swept in, she immediately enveloped me in a tight hug before sliding into the booth opposite me. You look good, she said, studying my face. More like yourself. I feel more like myself, I admitted. It's still strange sometimes, coming home to an empty apartment, but not in a bad way. Just different. The waiter took our drink orders, a glass of Cabernet for me, sparkling water with lime for Layla, who was 7 months pregnant with her first child. So, she said once he'd left, give me the full update. Last I heard, Tyler was still crashing on Eric's couch and Amber had completely ghosted him. I nodded. That's the latest information I have too, though it's been over 2 weeks since Eric texted me about it. I've been keeping my distance from that entire situation. Smart. And how are the mutual friends handling everything? I took a sip of water while considering the question. The social fallout had been one of the more complicated aspects to navigate. Mixed responses, I finally said. Jordan and May are firmly in my corner, they've both reached out and we've had lunch. Taylor and Chris seem to be avoiding taking sides by avoiding both of us. And Kevin is apparently still hanging out with Tyler, which I expected. Layla rolled her eyes at the mention of Kevin, who had never been her favorite person in our social circle. Kevin would stand by a friend who committed actual murder as long as they kept inviting him to poker night. I laughed despite myself. That's not entirely fair. But yes, his loyalty is uncomplicated by ethical considerations. Our drinks arrived, and we placed orders for our usual meals, margarita pizza for Layla, whose pregnancy cravings had narrowed her typically adventurous palate, and mushroom risotto for me. And what about Amber? Layla asked once the waiter had left. Any further contact since that text? Nothing, I confirmed. And I haven't reached out either. I'm still processing that betrayal. It feels different than Tyler's somehow. Because it is different, Layla said firmly. Tyler was your boyfriend, but Amber was supposed to be your friend. There's a different kind of trust there, a different covenant. I nodded, grateful as always for my sister's ability to articulate what I was feeling. Exactly. With Tyler, there was always the understanding that our relationship might not last forever. But with friends, especially close ones, you don't go in expecting an expiration date. Have you thought about whether you might eventually want to rebuild that friendship? Not now, obviously, but someday? I considered the question seriously. I don't know. Part of me thinks some betrayals just permanently alter the landscape. Can I ever trust her again? Would I constantly be wondering if history might repeat itself? That sounds exhausting. It would be, Layla agreed. But people do sometimes change. The Amber who made those terrible choices might not be the Amber who exists a year from now, after experiencing the consequences of those choices. Maybe, I conceded. But that's a decision for future Mia. Present Mia is still a bit raw about the whole thing. Our food arrived, momentarily pausing the conversation as we arranged plates and napkins. I watched Layla inhale the aroma of her pizza with the exaggerated pleasure only a pregnant woman could display toward food. Speaking of future versions of ourselves, Layla said between bites, have you thought about dating again? Or is that question still firmly in too soon territory? I laughed. Definitely too soon. I'm enjoying the quiet of being on my own right now, getting reacquainted with myself without someone else's needs and preferences constantly in the equation. That sounds healthy, she approved. Though when you are ready, I have this colleague who… Absolutely not, I interrupted, pointing my fork at her. No setups. When I decide to date again, I'll handle it myself. Probably with one of those apps everyone uses now. Layla made a face. Those are a cesspool. But fine, your love life, your rules. As we finished our meal, the conversation drifted to other topics, Layla's pregnancy, my work projects, the family vacation our parents were planning for the winter holidays. It felt good to focus on normal life rather than constantly processing the emotional aftermath of betrayal. We were sharing a tiramisu when my phone buzzed with an incoming call. I glanced at the screen, then did a double take. It was Amber. After 3 weeks of silence, her name on my caller ID was jarring. Everything okay? Layla asked, noticing my expression. It's Amber, I said, showing her the screen. Layla's eyebrows shot up. Are you going to answer it? I hesitated, then silenced the call. Not right now. Whatever she wants to say can wait until I'm ready to hear it. The phone buzzed again almost immediately, this time with a text. Mia, I know I'm probably the last person you want to talk to right now. I completely understand. But something's happened that you should know about. It's not an emergency, but it is important. Call me when you can. I showed the message to Layla, who frowned thoughtfully. That's intriguingly vague, she said. But also respectful of your boundaries. She's not demanding an immediate response. True, I acknowledged. I'll call her tomorrow, maybe. When I'm home and can process whatever this is privately. Good plan, Layla agreed. And you'll tell me everything immediately after, of course. I smiled at my sister's transparent nosiness. Of course. The next morning, after a good night's sleep and a calming yoga session, I felt centered enough to return Amber's call. I made a cup of tea, settled on my balcony with a throw blanket against the autumn chill, and dialed her number. She answered on the second ring. Mia. Thank you for calling back. Your message said it was important, I replied, keeping my tone neutral. It is. She paused, seemingly gathering her thoughts. I wanted to let you know that Tyler has been saying things about you. To mutual friends, on social media, to anyone who will listen. I felt my stomach tighten. What kind of things? He's portraying himself as the victim. Saying you manipulated and sabotaged his relationship with me out of jealousy. That you hacked his accounts to fabricate evidence. Her voice was steady but apologetic. He's trying to control the narrative. I see, I said, processing this information. It wasn't entirely surprising. Tyler had always been skilled at positioning himself as the reasonable party in conflicts, but the specifics were more aggressive than I'd anticipated. I've been setting the record straight wherever I can, Amber continued, making it clear that I saw the evidence myself, that it was undeniably real, and that his behavior was inexcusable. This did surprise me. You're defending me? Yes, she said simply. It's the least I can do. I know it doesn't make up for what I did, but I won't let him villainize you for exposing the truth. I wasn't sure how to respond. Part of me was grateful for her unexpected alliance in this situation, while another part remained wary of trusting her in any capacity. There's more, Amber added when I didn't immediately reply. He's been harassing me too. Showing up at my workplace, sending emails from new addresses when I block the old ones. Nothing overtly threatening, but persistent and unsettling. Have you considered a restraining order? I asked, professional concern overriding my personal feelings. I've started documenting everything, she confirmed. My brother's a lawyer, and he's helping me understand my options. We were both silent for a moment. This conversation felt surreal, discussing our mutual ex as if we were simply concerned acquaintances rather than two women whose trust in each other had been shattered. Thank you for letting me know, I finally said. About both situations. Of course. Amber hesitated, then added, I know this doesn't change anything between us, Mia. I betrayed you in the worst way, and I'll regret that forever. But I couldn't let you be blindsided by his version of events. I appreciate that, I said, and found that I meant it. Are you okay? With everything? I'm working through it, she replied. Started therapy, actually. Trying to understand why I was willing to hurt someone I cared about for a relationship that was clearly toxic from the start. Her candor caught me off guard. The Amber I'd known had always been reluctant to examine her own motivations too closely, preferring to move forward rather than reflect. That sounds healthy, I said, echoing my response to Layla from the previous evening. It's hard, she admitted. But necessary. Anyway, I should let you go. I just wanted to make sure you were aware of what Tyler's been saying. Thanks again for the heads up, I said. And Amber? Take care of yourself. You too, Mia. After ending the call, I sat with my now lukewarm tea, contemplating this new development. Tyler's attempt to rewrite history wasn't surprising, but the intensity of his approach was concerning. And Amber's role as unlikely ally added another layer of complexity to an already complicated situation. I texted Layla a brief summary of the conversation, then opened my laptop to check my social media accounts, which I'd been largely avoiding since the breakup. Sure enough, there were vague but pointed posts from Tyler visible to our mutual connections, comments about manipulative exes and the lengths some women will go to when rejected. Nothing that directly named me, but the implications were clear to anyone familiar with our situation. More telling were the responses, or lack thereof. Most of our mutual friends had neither liked nor commented on these posts. The only consistent engagement came from Kevin and two of Tyler's coworkers I'd never particularly connected with. It seemed his attempt to control the narrative wasn't gaining much traction. Still, seeing his public efforts to paint me as the villain stirred something uncomfortable in my chest. Not hurt, exactly, but a sort of indignant disbelief that he would try to claim victimhood after his own deliberate betrayal. My phone buzzed with Layla's response, "What a piece of work. Want me to have Diego hack his accounts and post embarrassing confessions? That's a joke." Mostly. I smiled despite myself. Layla's husband was a cybersecurity expert who would never actually misuse his skills that way, but the offer, even in jest, was a welcome reminder that I had people firmly in my corner. Tempting, but I think I'll handle this my way, I replied. And I would. Not with public rebuttals or emotional confrontations, but with the same measured approach that had served me well so far, letting the truth speak for itself. I spent the afternoon crafting a single, carefully worded post that I shared on my social media accounts. "Friends, I've become aware that there are some concerning narratives circulating about my recent breakup. While I have no interest in public drama, I do value truth. The end of my relationship with Tyler came after I discovered his ongoing affair with someone I considered a friend. I addressed this privately and directly with both parties, providing them with factual information that I verified personally. My goal was not revenge, but ensuring that everyone involved could make informed decisions about their own lives. I've since moved forward and am focusing on my own well-being. I hope everyone else can do the same." I tagged no one, named no specific details beyond what was already common knowledge, and kept my tone neutral and mature. It wasn't about winning a public relations battle, but about establishing a simple boundary. I wouldn't allow my character to be falsely maligned without response. Within hours, my post had received supportive comments and messages from friends who had been unsure how to navigate the situation. Several people reached out privately to express their support and distance themselves from Tyler's version of events. Even Kevin, Tyler's most steadfast defender, was noticeably silent. That evening, Eric texted me, "Just saw your post, classy as always. For what it's worth, T is spiraling. Got drunk last night and admitted he knows he's the bad guy but can't handle how everyone seems to see right through him." I didn't respond immediately, unsure if Eric was still firmly in Tyler's camp despite recognizing his friend's flaws, or if he was trying to establish some kind of independent communication channel. "I'm not looking for updates on Tyler's mental state," I finally replied. "But I appreciate you reaching out." "Fair enough," Eric responded. "Just thought you might want to know he's running out of couches to crash on. His reputation's taking a hit everywhere." This information didn't bring the satisfaction Tyler might have expected me to feel. There was no joy in knowing he was struggling, even if those struggles were the natural consequences of his own actions. What I felt instead was a profound gratitude that I had discovered the truth before investing more years in someone capable of such calculated deception. The next day, I received another unexpected communication, an email from Amber with a simple subject line, "Additional information." The body contained only a brief message. "Mia, I found these while going through old messages. I thought you should have them, though I understand if you choose not to read them. Like everything else, what you do with this information is entirely up to you. Amber." Attached were several screenshots of conversations between her and Tyler from the early stages of their affair. Unlike the evidence I'd already seen from Tyler's exchanges with Eric, these showed Tyler's direct communications with Amber about me. I hesitated before opening them, weighing my need for complete information against the potential pain of seeing more betrayal detailed in their own words. Ultimately, knowledge had served me well so far, so I clicked on the first image. What I found was both worse and more illuminating than I'd expected: Tyler systematically lying to Amber about our relationship, claiming I was controlling and emotionally manipulative, that I regularly threatened self-harm if he tried to leave, that I monitored his communications and isolated him from friends. None of it was remotely true. Our relationship had its issues, certainly, but the person he described bore no resemblance to me or our actual dynamic. He had constructed an elaborate fiction to justify his betrayal to Amber, positioning himself as the trapped victim and her as the rescuer. The final screenshot showed a recent message from Tyler to Amber, sent after she had ended things. "You're only believing Mia's version because she got to you first with her manipulated evidence. She's been planning this for months, trying to sabotage us because she can't stand to see me happy with someone else. This is exactly what she does, turns people against me, then plays the victim. I thought you were different. I thought you understood me." I closed the images, feeling a strange sense of clarity. These weren't just the actions of someone who had made a mistake or followed an ill-advised attraction. This was systematic deception, deliberate character assassination, a calculated effort to create a reality that justified his desires while absolving him of responsibility. I forwarded the email to Layla with a simple note, "The rabbit hole goes deeper," then closed my laptop and went for a long walk through the nearby park. The autumn air was crisp, leaves crunching beneath my feet as I processed this final piece of the puzzle. By the time I returned home, I had reached a decision about how to handle this latest development. I would not engage with Tyler's narrative in any way, not to defend myself, not to correct his lies, not to acknowledge his existence. The truth was already out there for those who mattered. Continuing to react would only keep me tethered to a story that I was ready to close. As for Amber, I composed a brief reply to her email. "Thank you for sharing these. They provide valuable context and confirmation of what I've already come to understand about the situation. I appreciate your honesty at this stage, even though it doesn't undo what happened. I hope you're continuing to prioritize your well-being through all of this." It wasn't forgiveness, exactly, but it was acknowledgement of her current efforts to be truthful, even when that truth didn't paint her in a flattering light. Whether our friendship could ever be rebuilt remained an open question, but I no longer felt the acute pain of her betrayal that had dominated my emotional landscape weeks earlier. That night, I received a final text from Eric. "T's been asked to leave my place. His campaign against you crossed a line I'm not comfortable with. Just FYI. I didn't ask for details. I didn't need them." Whatever line Tyler had crossed with Eric was between them, another consequence unfolding in the expanding ripples of his choices. 6 weeks after Tyler had sat on our couch and delivered his practiced breakup speech, the man who had expected my tears and devastation had lost his girlfriend, his temporary housing, and at least some of his friends. Not because I had orchestrated a campaign against him, but because I had refused to follow his script, choosing instead to act with dignity, to share truth rather than emotional drama, and to focus on rebuilding my life rather than destroying his. He thought I'd cry when he left me for her. He didn't expect what I sent to her inbox. And the truth, it turned out, was more powerful than any revenge I could have planned. 2 months after Tyler moved out, life had found a new rhythm. My apartment was fully reclaimed, his remaining belongings either returned or donated, the spaces he once occupied now filled with things that brought me joy. I'd joined a weekend hiking group, started taking Italian cooking classes on Wednesday evenings, and reconnected with friends I'd unintentionally neglected during my relationship. "So you're really not going to Adam's Halloween party?" Jordan asked over lunch. We'd started a bi-weekly tradition of trying new restaurants together, something Tyler had always complained about due to the unpredictability of the food. "Really not," I confirmed, sampling the Vietnamese fusion dish we'd ordered. "Too many overlapping social circles. I'm not ready for that level of potential awkwardness." Jordan nodded, understanding without judgment. "Fair enough, though from what I hear, Tyler hasn't been invited to much lately. His little smear campaign backfired pretty spectacularly." I shrugged, deliberately keeping my tone neutral. I'm trying not to focus on Tyler's social calendar. It's not relevant to my life anymore. "Of course," Jordan agreed quickly. "Sorry for bringing it up. I just thought you might want to know that people have generally seen through his version of events." "I appreciate that," I said, meaning it. "But I'm finding that the less mental real estate I devote to anything Tyler-related, the better I feel." Jordan raised her water glass in a mock toast. "To reclaiming mental real estate. May your property values continue to rise." I laughed, genuinely happy in that moment. These were the kinds of friendships I was nurturing now, straightforward, supportive, free from the complicated politics that had characterized so much of my social life when Tyler was in it. Later that afternoon, as I was deep into a work project, my phone rang with an unfamiliar number. Normally I might have let it go to voicemail, but I was expecting a call from a potential client, so I answered. "Hello, is this Mia Lawson?" A professional-sounding woman's voice came through the line. "Yes, this is she. Ms. Lawson, my name is Detective Sarah Rodriguez with the City Police Department. I'm calling regarding an ongoing investigation involving Tyler Bennett. Do you have a few moments to talk?" My heart rate instantly accelerated. Police involvement was the last thing I'd expected. "Yes, of course. What's this about?" "We're investigating a series of harassing communications and potential stalking behaviors reported by Amber Collins. Mr. Bennett has been identified as the individual responsible. Ms. Collins has indicated that you may have relevant information regarding Mr. Bennett's patterns of behavior." I took a deep breath, processing this development. "I see. How can I help?" "We'd like to take a formal statement from you regarding your relationship with Mr. Bennett," particularly any concerning behaviors you may have observed toward the end of your relationship or after it concluded. This would be entirely voluntary, but potentially valuable to our investigation. I'm happy to provide whatever information might be helpful, I said, my mind already cataloging relevant interactions. When would you need this statement? If possible, we'd like you to come to the station tomorrow. Would 10 a.m. work for your schedule? We confirmed the details, and after ending the call, I immediately texted Layla, Tyler's being investigated by the police for harassment/stalking Amber. They want me to give a statement tomorrow. Her reply came quickly, holy consequences, Batman. You okay? Want me to come with you? I think I'm fine to go alone, I responded. Just processing the escalation. Call me after. And remember, just stick to facts, no speculation. Always, I replied, grateful for my sister's level-headed advice. The next morning, I dressed in professional attire, a navy blazer over a simple white blouse and tailored pants, and arrived at the police station 15 minutes early. Detective Rodriguez met me in the lobby, a composed woman in her 40s with observant eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor. She led me to an interview room that looked nothing like the dramatic versions on television, just a simple space with a table, chairs, and recording equipment. After explaining the procedures and turning on the audio recording, she began with basic questions about my relationship with Tyler, how long we were together, when and how it ended, the nature of our interactions since the breakup. I answered each question factually, without emotional embellishment or subjective characterizations. When she asked about Tyler's reaction to the breakup, I described his evident surprise at my calm response and subsequent attempts to rewrite the narrative through social media and mutual friends. Ms. Collins has provided us with extensive documentation of Mr. Bennett's communications following their breakup, Detective Rodriguez explained. These include repeated unwanted contact despite clear requests to stop, appearing at her workplace, and what could be interpreted as veiled threats. Did you experience anything similar after your relationship ended? Not to that extent, I replied honestly. Tyler seemed more focused on controlling the social narrative than on direct contact with me. He made efforts to portray me negatively to mutual friends and online, but he didn't attempt to contact me directly or appear at my workplace. Why do you think your experiences differed in that respect? I considered the question carefully. I believe it's because I didn't engage with his attempts to control the narrative. When he realized I wouldn't react emotionally or publicly challenge his version of events beyond one factual statement, he focused his attention elsewhere. Amber more directly confronted his behavior, which may have escalated his responses. The detective nodded, making notes. That aligns with typical patterns we observe in these cases. Did Mr. Bennett ever display controlling or possessive behaviors during your relationship? Nothing that would have raised immediate red flags, I said after thoughtful consideration. In retrospect, there were subtle patterns: discomfort when I spent time with friends without him, occasional checking of my phone that was framed as casual interest, criticism disguised as concern if I dressed in ways that might attract attention. But these developed so gradually that I normalized them rather than recognizing them as problematic. We continued for nearly 2 hours, covering specific incidents, communications, and behavioral patterns. I provided copies of the screenshots Amber had sent me showing Tyler's mischaracterization of our relationship, as well as documentation of his social media posts that indirectly targeted me after the breakup. As the interview concluded, Detective Rodriguez turned off the recording equipment and thanked me for my time. Your statement will be helpful in establishing context for the current situation, she explained. Based on the evidence gathered so far, we'll be pursuing charges of harassment and cyberstalking. Mr. Bennett will likely receive a court summons within the week. I nodded, feeling a complex mix of emotions, concern that the situation had escalated to this point, relief that Amber's complaints were being taken seriously, and a strange detachment from the whole process. This was no longer my story. I was merely providing background information for someone else's chapter. What happens next? I asked. For you, nothing unless we need clarification on your statement. For Ms. Collins, we'll continue building the case to support the protective order she's requested. For Mr. Bennett, he'll be formally notified of the charges and required to appear in court. The judge will likely issue a temporary restraining order while the case proceeds. As I left the police station, I called Layla as promised and filled her in on the interview. That sounds incredibly stressful, she said sympathetically. How are you feeling? Oddly calm, I replied, walking toward the parking garage. It was intense but also validating to have someone in authority take these behaviors seriously. I keep thinking about how differently this might have played out if I hadn't discovered the affair when I did, if I'd continued in that relationship without understanding what was happening. Don't go down that rabbit hole, Layla advised. You did discover it, you did handle it with remarkable grace, and now you're free to build something better. You're right, I agreed. No point in dwelling on what-ifs. Exactly. Now, more importantly, are we still on for baby shower planning this weekend? Mom is sending increasingly panicked texts about color schemes. I laughed, grateful for the shift to normal family matters. Absolutely. Tell Mom the color scheme is whatever makes the pregnant lady happy, and we'll sort out the details on Saturday. That evening, I received an unexpected email from Amber. Mia. Detective Rodriguez let me know that you provided a statement today. Thank you for being willing to do that. I know it must have been difficult to revisit everything. I wanted to let you know that I've been granted a temporary restraining order against Tyler. The formal hearing is next week, but this provides immediate protection. The detective seems confident that with the evidence we've provided, a permanent order will be issued. I'm not sharing this with an expectation of response or continued communication. I just thought you deserved to know the outcome of a process you contributed to. Take care, Amber. I read the message twice, appreciating both the information and the respectful tone. After brief consideration, I replied, Amber, thank you for the update. I'm glad the system is working as it should to provide you with protection. No one deserves to be harassed or made to feel unsafe, regardless of the complicated history involved. I hope the permanent order is granted and that you can move forward with peace of mind. Mia. It wasn't quite friendship, but it was civil closure, acknowledgement that despite everything that had happened between us, we could still recognize each other's basic humanity and right to safety. A week passed without further developments related to Tyler or the investigation. I immersed myself in work projects, finalizing details for Layla's baby shower, and enjoying my cooking classes. The Italian instructor had taken a particular interest in helping me perfect my risotto technique, staying after class to demonstrate the precise stirring method that made all the difference. You have good instincts, Marco had said the previous evening, watching me add stock to the rice with newfound confidence. You just needed to trust them more. That comment had resonated beyond cooking, reflecting much of what I'd learned about myself in recent months. I did have good instincts, about relationships, about work, about what I needed to thrive. I'd just spent too long doubting them in favor of accommodating others' preferences and perspectives. On Saturday morning, as I was arranging flowers for Layla's shower, my phone buzzed with a text from Jordan. Heads up, Tyler was just escorted out of his apartment building by police. Not sure what happened, but thought you should know in case he tries to contact you. I stared at the message, unsure how to process this information or why Jordan thought I needed an immediate warning. Before I could formulate a response, another text came through. Sorry if that was alarming. Chris lives in the same building and just witnessed it. Wasn't trying to scare you, just wanted you to be informed. Thanks for letting me know, I replied. I appreciate the heads up, though I don't expect he'll contact me. I continued with the flower arrangements, deliberately focusing on the task at hand rather than speculating about what might have happened with Tyler. Whatever was unfolding in his life was no longer my concern, though I hoped it wouldn't impact Amber's safety or peace of mind. Later that afternoon, as Layla's friends and family gathered to celebrate her impending motherhood, I found myself genuinely present in the moment, laughing at the ridiculous baby-themed games, helping my sister open gifts, enjoying connections with people who mattered in my life. Tyler's dramatic exit from his building that morning felt like distant news about a stranger, barely relevant to the joy of this celebration. It was only that evening, after returning home from the successful shower, that I learned what had actually happened. Eric called, his voice uncharacteristically serious. Mia, I know we haven't really talked since everything went down, but I thought you should hear this from someone who knows the whole situation rather than through the rumor mill. Hear what? I asked, setting down the leftover cake I'd been putting away. Tyler violated the restraining order. Showed up at Amber's workplace again yesterday, caused a scene. When the police came to his apartment this morning with an arrest warrant, they found evidence that he's been. Eric hesitated. Been what? Stalking you too. Photos from outside your building, screenshots of your social media with disturbing comments, a journal with entries about making you understand what you've lost. It's pretty serious, Mia. They've added charges and he's being held without bail until his arraignment Monday. I sank into a kitchen chair, my legs suddenly unsteady. I had no idea. I haven't noticed anything unusual around my building or felt like I was being watched. That's because he was being careful with you, Eric explained. He knew you had evidence that could damage him further, so he was planning some kind of, I don't know, grand confrontation, I guess? But he wanted to wait until he had everything prepared. The journal entries are honestly chilling. A cold weight settled in my stomach. All this time I'd been feeling safe, rebuilding my life, while Tyler had apparently been observing from the shadows, nurturing resentments, and planning some undefined reckoning. The detective who interviewed me never mentioned suspecting anything like this, I said, trying to make sense of the revelation. They didn't know until today, Eric replied. The warrant was specifically related to Amber's case. The evidence about you was discovered incidentally during the search. How do you know all this? I asked, suddenly suspicious. Eric sighed. Tyler called me from jail. One phone call, you know? He wanted me to go to his apartment and secure certain items before the police could find them. I refused and reported the call to the detectives handling his case. That's when they told me what they'd found. I'm done enabling his behavior, Mia. I should have drawn that line a long time ago. The conversation continued for a few more minutes, with Eric providing what additional details he knew and apologizing for not recognizing the severity of Tyler's issues sooner. After we hung up, I sat motionless in my kitchen, processing this dramatic shift in my understanding of the situation. I'd believed I was safely on the periphery of Tyler's ongoing drama, an observer rather than a target. Learning that I'd been under surveillance without my knowledge, featuring in disturbing private writings, was profoundly unsettling. My phone rang again, Detective Rodriguez this time. Ms. Lawson, I wanted to personally inform you of some developments in our investigation of Tyler Bennett. I believe you may have already heard some details from Eric Morgan, who contacted us earlier today. Yes, I confirmed. He called me a few minutes ago. Is it true? Tyler has been watching me? I'm afraid so, she confirmed. During the execution of our search warrant this morning, we discovered evidence suggesting Mr. Bennett has been engaging in stalking behaviors directed at both Ms. Collins and yourself, though with different patterns and apparent intentions. She explained that while Tyler's actions toward Amber had been overtly confrontational and harassing, his surveillance of me had been more secretive, apparently building towards some planned interaction that hadn't yet occurred. Based on the evidence recovered, we're seeking additional charges, Detective Rodriguez continued. And I strongly recommend that you pursue a protective order similar to Ms. Collins. My office can assist with the paperwork if you'd like. I agreed immediately, the reality of my situation finally sinking in. This wasn't over, as I'd believed. Tyler's obsession had merely gone underground, becoming potentially more dangerous in its hidden nature. After arranging to meet with Detective Rodriguez on Monday to complete the necessary documentation, I called Layla, needing my sister's steadying presence even if only through the phone. I'm coming over, she declared after hearing the abbreviated version of events. Diego will drive me. Don't argue. 30 minutes later, my very pregnant sister and her concerned husband were sitting in my living room while I recounted everything I'd learned. Diego, whose cybersecurity expertise suddenly seemed particularly relevant, asked practical questions about my digital security while Layla focused on my emotional state. You can stay with us tonight, she offered. The guest room is all set up. I considered the offer, weighing my instinctive desire to remain in my own space against the potential benefits of company after such disturbing revelations. I think I'd rather stay here, I decided finally. Tyler is in custody, so there's no immediate threat. And I don't want to start seeing my home as unsafe. That feels like giving him power over my sense of security. Diego nodded approvingly. That's a healthy perspective, but let's still take some precautions. He spent the next hour helping me strengthen my digital security, changing passwords, enabling two-factor authentication on all accounts, checking for tracking software on my devices. He also did a thorough check of my apartment, looking for any signs of unauthorized entry or surveillance equipment. Everything looks clean, he reported finally, but I'd recommend a security consultation for the apartment itself. Better locks, perhaps a simple camera system for the entryway. I'll arrange that tomorrow, I agreed, grateful for his practical approach. After they left, Layla extracting multiple promises that I would call immediately if I felt uncomfortable for any reason, I sat alone in my living room, trying to reconcile the safety I'd felt with the reality that had been unfolding without my awareness. The next morning brought another development, a call from Amber. I just heard from Detective Rodriguez about what they found in Tyler's apartment, she said without preamble. Are you okay? I'm processing, I replied honestly. It's disconcerting to learn I've been watched without realizing it. I understand that feeling, Amber said quietly. I'm so sorry you've been drawn back into this nightmare just when you were moving forward. Thank you. I'm meeting with the detective tomorrow to file for a protective order. Good, she said firmly. The legal process isn't perfect, but it creates an important record and provides real consequences if he violates the order. We talked for a few more minutes about practical security measures and the upcoming legal proceedings. As the conversation drew to a close, Amber hesitated, then added, Mia, I know our friendship is probably beyond repair, and I accept that. But I want you to know that I'll testify, provide evidence, do whatever is needed to support your case against Tyler. You deserve to feel safe, and I'll help ensure that however I can. Her offer seemed genuinely motivated by concern rather than attempted reconciliation or absolution. I appreciate that, Amber. Truly. After hanging up, I spent the day implementing additional security measures, scheduling a locksmith to upgrade my doors, researching simple security cameras for my entryway, and accepting Jordan's offer to accompany me to and from work for the next few days until everything was in place. Monday's meeting with Detective Rodriguez was straightforward and efficient. She helped me complete the necessary paperwork for an emergency protective order, which would be reviewed by a judge that afternoon. Given the evidence already in police possession, she anticipated no issues with approval. The arraignment is tomorrow, she explained as we finished the documentation. Mr. Bennett will be formally charged with multiple counts related to both Ms. Collins' case and yours. Based on the evidence and the nature of the offenses, it's highly unlikely he'll be released on bail, but the protective order provides an additional layer of security regardless of the outcome. By late afternoon, I received confirmation that the emergency order had been granted. It would remain in effect until the formal hearing scheduled for the following week, where a long-term order would be considered. As I drove home that evening, I reflected on how dramatically my situation had shifted in just 3 days. The peaceful new life I thought I was building had been revealed to have an invisible threat lurking at its edges. Yet despite the unsettling nature of these discoveries, I found myself feeling strangely empowered rather than frightened. Tyler's hidden surveillance and disturbing writings revealed far more about his character than they did about any vulnerability on my part. His obsession had led him directly to the consequences he now faced: legal charges, public embarrassment, potential imprisonment. And through it all, I had continued building a life based on authentic connections and genuine interests, unaware of his shadow presence but fundamentally unmoved by it. He had expected tears when he left me for Amber. He hadn't expected what I sent to her inbox, and he certainly hadn't anticipated that his efforts to regain control through intimidation and surveillance would ultimately result in his own confinement, while I remained free to continue the life he had so fatally underestimated. 3 days later, I sat in a courtroom watching Tyler's arraignment, accompanied by both Layla and Jordan for moral support. He looked diminished in his jail uniform, the confident posture I remembered replaced by hunched shoulders and darting eyes. When the judge denied bail based on the evidence of escalating behavior and potential flight risk, Tyler's face showed genuine shock, as if, even now, he couldn't quite believe his actions would have serious consequences. As we left the courthouse, a reporter approached, apparently recognizing me from the case details. Ms. Lawson, do you have any comment on the charges against your ex-boyfriend? I considered the question carefully, aware that whatever I said might appear in local news. The legal system is working as it should to address concerning behaviors, I said finally. My focus remains on moving forward positively with my life and ensuring my own safety and well-being. It was a measured response that offered no dramatic soundbites or emotional reactions, exactly the kind of dignity-preserving approach that had guided me since discovering Tyler's betrayal months earlier. That evening, as I prepared dinner in my newly secured apartment, complete with upgraded locks and a discreet camera system, I received a text from Marco, my cooking instructor. Hope your risotto practice is going well. We're doing homemade pasta next week, thought you might want to know since you mentioned it was a favorite. I smiled at the simple, uncomplicated message. This was what normal communication looked like: no hidden agendas, no manipulation, just straightforward interest and genuine connection. Looking forward to it, I replied. I've been wanting to learn proper pasta technique for ages. As I set my phone down and returned to chopping vegetables for my dinner, I realized I was humming, a small but significant indicator of my internal state. Despite the tumultuous revelations of the past week, I felt fundamentally at peace with where I was and where I was heading. Tyler had thought I would crumble when he left. Instead, I had responded with dignity and strategic truth rather than emotional drama. Now, even as his obsession had been revealed and legal consequences unfolded, I remained steady in the life I was creating, stronger, more discerning, and increasingly confident in my own worth and wisdom. He thought I'd cry when he left me for her. He didn't expect what I sent to her inbox. And he certainly never anticipated that in trying to destroy me, he would only succeed in revealing his own fundamental weakness, while I continued building a life characterized by authentic strength. 6 months had passed since Tyler's arraignment. Winter had given way to spring, and my life had settled into a new normal that bore little resemblance to the one I'd shared with him. The protective order had been made permanent following a hearing where both Amber and I had testified about Tyler's patterns of behavior. He had ultimately accepted a plea agreement on multiple charges, resulting in an 18-month sentence with mandatory counseling and strict post-release conditions. "How does it feel knowing he'll be out next year?" my therapist, Dr. Chen, asked during our monthly session. I'd started seeing her after Tyler's arrest, not because I was falling apart, but because I wanted professional guidance in processing such an unexpected conclusion to what had already been a difficult chapter. "Less concerning than I might have expected," I replied thoughtfully. "The legal restrictions will remain in place long after his release, and honestly, I think the experience has been sobering for him." Dr. Chen nodded. "You've mentioned that his communication through legal channels has shifted in tone over time." "Yes," I confirmed. "The initial angry denials and blame-shifting gradually transformed into what seems like genuine recognition of his issues. Obviously, I can't know for sure if it's authentic change or just another performance, but either way, I'm not focused on his journey." "That's a healthy perspective," she affirmed. "Your safety is properly secured through legal mechanisms, allowing you to direct your energy toward your own growth rather than monitoring his." This was the approach that had served me well throughout the entire process, acknowledging reality without dwelling on it, taking necessary protective measures without allowing fear to dominate my decisions, moving forward with purpose rather than remaining tethered to past trauma. After my therapy session, I met Layla and my new nephew, Daniel, at a cafe near her house. At 3 months old, he was alert and curious, taking in the world around him with wide eyes while nestled securely in his carrier. "He's getting so big," I observed, gently touching his tiny hand and smiling as his fingers reflexively curled around mine. "Growing too fast," Layla agreed, looking simultaneously exhausted and radiant in the way that only new mothers can. "Did your session go well?" "It did. Dr. Chen thinks I'm ready to reduce to bi-monthly appointments. She says my integration of the experience is progressing remarkably well." That sounds positive, though I have no idea what integration of the experience actually means in non-therapist language. I laughed. "I think it's basically therapist speak for you're not letting past crap define your present life." "In that case, I definitely agree with her assessment," Layla said, adjusting Daniel's blanket. "You've handled this whole situation with more grace than anyone could reasonably expect." Our conversation shifted to family matters, Mom and Dad's upcoming anniversary, Layla's gradual return to work, my recent promotion at the design firm where I'd been increasingly taking on leadership responsibilities. The normalcy of these topics felt like a victory in itself after months of legal proceedings and security concerns dominating our interactions. As we were finishing our coffee, Layla gave me a thoughtful look. "So, are you going to tell me about Marco? Or do I have to pretend I haven't noticed the mysterious smile that appears whenever you mention your cooking classes?" I felt an unexpected warmth rise to my cheeks. "There's not much to tell. We've had coffee a few times after class. He's interesting, talented, kind, and devastatingly handsome, from what you've shown me," Layla added with a grin. "Is it moving beyond coffee?" "Actually, yes," I admitted. "He's invited me to dinner at his place tomorrow night. He's cooking, obviously." "Obviously," Layla echoed. "And you're going?" I nodded. "I am. It feels right. Uncomplicated in the best way." "I'm happy for you," my sister said sincerely. "Just promise you'll take things at whatever pace feels comfortable. There's no rush." "That's exactly what I've been doing," I assured her. "Marco knows about Tyler, about everything that happened. Not every detail, but enough to understand why I might need to move carefully. He's been remarkably patient." "He sounds like a good one," Layla observed. "He is," I agreed. "But more importantly, I'm in a good place to recognize that and appreciate it properly." The next evening, as I prepared for dinner at Marco's apartment, I found myself experiencing a pleasant anticipation rather than anxiety. I chose a simple dress that made me feel confident, applied light makeup, and selected a bottle of wine I knew he'd appreciate based on our previous conversations. Marco lived in a converted industrial building downtown, exposed brick walls, high ceilings, large windows overlooking the river. When he opened the door, the rich aroma of authentic Italian cooking enveloped me immediately. Perfect timing, he greeted me with a warm smile, taking the wine and leaning in for a brief, comfortable kiss on my cheek. I just finished setting the table. His apartment reflected his personality, organized but not sterile, personal touches balanced with clean design, cooking equipment prominently featured alongside books and art. It felt immediately welcoming, a space created by someone who knew himself well and lived accordingly. Dinner was incredible, homemade pasta with a delicate truffle sauce, fresh bread, perfectly paired wine. The conversation flowed naturally, moving from cooking techniques to travel experiences, from family stories to professional aspirations. Marco listened as attentively as he spoke, a quality I'd come to value enormously. I was nervous about tonight, Marco admitted as we moved to his couch with glasses of dessert wine after the meal. I wanted everything to be perfect. It was wonderful, I assured him. Though I'm curious why you were nervous. You literally teach cooking for a living. He laughed, the sound warm and genuine. Not nervous about the food. Nervous about, he gestured between us, this. Us. I really like you, Mia. And I know you've been through a lot recently. I want to be sure I'm not pushing too fast or misreading where we are. His honesty was refreshing, direct without being demanding, vulnerable without manipulation. This was how healthy communication worked, I realized. No hidden agendas, no strategic positioning, just authentic expression of feelings with respect for the other person's boundaries. You're not misreading anything, I told him, meeting his eyes directly. I really like you too. And while I am being careful about moving forward, it's not because of hesitation about you specifically. It's about making sure I'm bringing my best self to whatever this becomes. Marco nodded, understanding evident in his expression. That makes perfect sense. And for what it's worth, from everything I've seen, your careful self is pretty fantastic. We spent the rest of the evening talking, occasionally lapsing into comfortable silence, gradually moving closer on the couch until I was leaning against his shoulder, his arm around me. When I finally checked the time, I was surprised to find it was nearly midnight. I should probably head home, I said reluctantly. I could call you a car, Marco offered. Or. He hesitated briefly, you're welcome to stay. Just to sleep, he added quickly. No pressure for anything more. I considered the invitation, checking in with my internal responses. There was no anxiety, no sense of obligation or concern about disappointing him if I declined. Just a simple choice between two comfortable options. I think I'd like to stay, I decided. Just to sleep. His smile was warm without being triumphant. I have spare toothbrushes and can lend you a t-shirt to sleep in. Later, as we lay in his bed with a respectful distance between us that gradually disappeared as I moved closer to rest my head against his chest, I reflected on how different this felt from the early days with Tyler. There was no rush of intense emotion mistaken for deeper connection, no strategic vulnerability designed to accelerate intimacy. Just two adults getting to know each other at a pace that honored both the potential of what might develop and the importance of building it on a solid foundation. Marco's breathing had grown deep and regular, his arm a gentle weight around my shoulders. I allowed myself to relax completely, feeling safe in a way that went beyond the absence of threat to encompass a positive presence of respect and genuine care. The next morning brought none of the awkwardness I might have feared. Marco made coffee and a simple breakfast, we talked easily about our plans for the day, and when it was time for me to leave, he walked me to my car with a kiss that was neither presumptuous nor tentative, just right for where we were. I'll call you later, he asked, the slight upward inflection making it a question rather than an assumption. I'd like that, I replied, meaning it completely. As I drove home to change before meeting Jordan for our Saturday museum outing, my phone buzzed with a text from Layla. How was dinner? Details required, but only the ones you want to share. I smiled at my sister's careful balancing of curiosity with respect for my privacy. It was wonderful. Food incredible, conversation better. Actually stayed over, just sleeping, and it wasn't weird at all this morning. Her response came quickly, that sounds promising. Taking it slow but not stalled. Perfect Mia pace. Exactly, I replied, realizing she'd articulated exactly what I was feeling. The museum with Jordan was followed by lunch at a new restaurant she'd been wanting to try, then an impromptu shopping trip where I found a jacket I'd been seeking for months. By the time I returned home in the late afternoon, I had 3 missed calls, one from Marco, which made me smile, and 2 from a number I didn't recognize. I returned Marco's call first, agreeing to dinner again the following weekend and a movie during the week. The unknown number hadn't left a message, so I initially dismissed it as a telemarketer. But when it called again while I was making tea, I decided to answer. Hello? Mia? It's Amber. I hadn't spoken to her in several months, not since the final court hearing where Tyler's plea agreement had been accepted. Our communication had been limited to legal matters, with the unspoken understanding that while we could interact civilly, the friendship was permanently altered. Amber, I acknowledged, keeping my tone neutral. Is everything okay? Yes, sorry for calling out of the blue. I received a notice from the Victim Services Office. Tyler's been approved for the early release program based on good behavior and completion of intensive counseling. He'll be out in 3 weeks, not next year. The information landed with surprising lightness. 6 months ago, this news might have triggered anxiety or anger. Now, it was simply information to be processed and addressed practically. I see. Thank you for letting me know. Have you been notified about any changes to the protective orders? They remain in effect completely, Amber assured me. And he'll have additional supervision through the early release program, regular check-ins, monitoring, continued mandatory counseling. The notification was just to ensure we're not caught off guard by the change in timeline. I appreciate you passing that along, I said sincerely. Are you concerned about the earlier release? Amber was quiet for a moment. Not for safety reasons. The legal protections are solid, and everything I've heard suggests he's genuinely engaged with the rehabilitation process. But it's strange to know he'll be out there again, back in the world we move through. I understand that feeling, I acknowledged. Though I found it helpful to remember that his presence or absence doesn't actually change anything about my life now. The legal boundaries remain regardless of his physical location. That's a good perspective, Amber said. I'll try to remember that. She paused, then added, How are you doing, generally? You sound good. The question felt less like an attempt to rebuild friendship and more like genuine human interest. I'm doing well, I replied honestly. Work is fulfilling, I've been enjoying some new hobbies, spending more time with family and friends. Life feels aligned, I guess is the word. I'm glad to hear that, she said, and I believed she meant it. You deserve good things, Mia. After the call ended, I sat with my tea, processing the news of Tyler's impending release. The fact that it hadn't immediately disrupted my sense of security or well-being felt like confirmation of how thoroughly I'd moved beyond that chapter. Tyler existed now as a historical figure in my life story rather than an active presence with the power to impact my current experience. I texted Layla to share the update, knowing she'd want to be informed, but kept the message matter-of-fact rather than alarmed. Her response was similarly practical, confirming the protective orders remained in place, offering support if I needed it, but not treating the news as a crisis requiring immediate intervention. The following weeks passed without disruption to my steadily improving life. My relationship with Marco continued to develop at a pace that felt right for both of us, regular dinners, weekends spent exploring the city, gradual physical intimacy that evolved naturally from growing emotional connection. He met Layla and Diego for dinner, charming them both with his genuine interest in their lives and obvious care for me. When the date of Tyler's release arrived, I acknowledged it mentally but didn't allow it to dominate my thoughts or plans. I went to work as usual, attended a lunchtime yoga class, and made dinner plans with Marco. The legal system had established clear boundaries that would be enforced regardless of my vigilance, allowing me to focus my energy on living rather than monitoring potential threats. 2 days later, I received an unexpected email forwarded through my attorney, the only channel through which Tyler was permitted to communicate with me under the terms of the protective order. The subject line read simply, "Acknowledging truth." After brief consideration, I decided to read it, curious about what Tyler might say now that he had completed the initial phase of his legal consequences. Mia. I've written and rewritten this message many times during the rehabilitation program, with guidance from counselors who've helped me understand the gravity and impact of my actions. What I'm sending now has been reviewed by the program administrators to ensure it respects legal boundaries while allowing me to express what I believe needs to be said. First, I want to acknowledge the harm I caused you through my betrayal of our relationship, my dishonesty when confronted, my attempts to manipulate mutual perceptions afterward, and ultimately my disturbing surveillance and obsessive behaviors that rightfully resulted in legal intervention. There is no justification for any of these actions. They reflect patterns of behavior stemming from deep insecurities and distorted thinking that I am now working to address through ongoing counseling. This is not offered as an excuse but as context for my commitment to change. I recognize that you handled an incredibly painful situation with remarkable dignity and restraint, choosing to share necessary truth rather than engage in the kind of destructive behaviors I later exhibited. The contrast between your response and mine speaks volumes about our respective characters at that time. I am writing not to request forgiveness or renewed contact, both of which would be inappropriate given our history and the legal boundaries properly established. I am writing simply to acknowledge truth, that I acted wrongfully towards someone who deserved far better, and that I am committed to ensuring such behavior never repeats with anyone else. I will continue to respect all legal restrictions regarding contact and proximity. Should you ever have concerns about any perceived violation, I encourage you to report it immediately through appropriate channels. With sincere acknowledgement of past wrongs and commitment to better choices, Tyler Bennett. I read the message twice, trying to gauge my emotional response. What I felt wasn't anger or anxiety or even vindication, just a calm acknowledgement that Tyler appeared to be taking genuine responsibility for his actions, perhaps for the first time since I'd known him. Whether this represented true growth or another calculated performance was impossible to determine with certainty. But it also wasn't my responsibility to evaluate. His journey toward whatever accountability or change might be possible belonged to him alone, just as my journey toward healing and rebuilding had been mine. After brief consideration, I forwarded the email to my attorney with a simple note, no response needed. Just documenting the communication for the record. That evening, as Marco and I prepared dinner together in my kitchen, he was teaching me his grandmother's recipe for osso buco. I mentioned the email casually, treating it as an interesting development rather than a significant emotional event. How did it make you feel? He asked, his attention focused on showing me the proper way to sear the meat without losing moisture. Neutral, mostly, I replied honestly, measuring herbs for the sauce. It was clearly crafted with professional guidance, so it's hard to know how much reflects genuine change versus rehabilitation program requirements. But ultimately, that's not really my concern. Marco nodded, understanding without pressing. The boundaries remain regardless of his internal state. Exactly. And my life continues on its own path, unaffected by whatever insights he may or may not be developing. Later, as we sat on my balcony enjoying the meal we'd created together, Marco reached for my hand across the small table. I've been thinking about something, and I want to share it without creating pressure or expectation. That sounds intriguingly cryptic, I teased gently. He smiled, a hint of nervousness visible despite his usual confidence. My lease is up in 2 months. I've been considering my options, and I realized that I spend most of my free time here with you anyway, so I was wondering if you might be open to discussing the possibility of me moving in. Not immediately, we could talk about timing that works for both of us. And if it feels too soon, I completely understand. The proposal hung between us, offered with the same respectful directness that had characterized our entire relationship. No manipulation, no pressure, just honest communication of desires with explicit acknowledgement of my agency in the decision. I considered how different this felt from previous relationship milestones. There was no rush of intensity mistaken for certainty, no pressure to prove commitment through escalating steps, no fear that declining would damage what we were building. Just a practical suggestion based on existing patterns, presented for mutual consideration. I'd like to think about it, I said finally. Not because I'm hesitant about us, but because I want to make sure any decision comes from a thoughtful place rather than emotional momentum. Of course, Marco agreed immediately. Take whatever time you need. It's a significant step, and there's no rush. The conversation moved easily to other topics, his upcoming cooking demonstration at a local food festival, my team's new design project, plans for a weekend hike if the weather cooperated. The ease with which we navigated the territory between individual autonomy and growing partnership continued to confirm that whatever we were building rested on a foundation of mutual respect rather than strategic management or emotional manipulation. Over the following week, I thought carefully about Marco's suggestion, discussing it with both Layla and Dr. Chen to ensure I was approaching the decision with appropriate self-awareness rather than unconscious reaction to past experiences. What feels different about this potential step compared to how you might have approached it in previous relationships? Dr. Chen asked during our session. Everything, I replied after consideration. With Tyler, moving in together happened almost automatically, a practical decision driven by lease timing and financial efficiency rather than deliberate relationship progression. There was no real discussion about expectations or boundaries or how we'd navigate shared space while maintaining individual identity. And with Marco? With Marco, I find myself thinking about specific aspects, how we'd handle alone time, division of household responsibilities, financial arrangements. Not from a place of anxiety, but from recognition that these practical elements matter for long-term compatibility. Dr. Chen nodded approvingly. That suggests you're approaching this decision from a place of mature discernment rather than emotional impulse or external pressure. What other factors are you considering? Whether I'm truly ready for shared space again, independent of how right Marco feels. Whether I've had enough time to establish my own patterns and preferences after years of accommodation. Whether this step aligns with the pace that's felt healthy for our relationship so far. All thoughtful considerations, Dr. Chen observed. And where are you landing with those reflections? I smiled slightly. Surprisingly comfortable with the idea, actually. It feels like a natural progression rather than a dramatic leap. Marco respects my independence, creates space for my needs without prompting, and communicates directly about his own. Those patterns seem likely to translate well to shared living. 2 days later, over dinner at my favorite restaurant, the one Tyler had always complained about, I gave Marco my answer. I've been thinking about your suggestion, I began, meeting his eyes directly. And I'd like to try sharing space, with a few specific parameters to ensure it works for both of us. His smile was warm but tempered with appropriate seriousness for the conversation. I'd love to hear what parameters you're thinking about. We spent the next hour discussing practical arrangements, maintaining some separate storage spaces for genuine alone time when needed, equitable division of household responsibilities based on preferences rather than gender expectations, transparent financial arrangements that preserved individual autonomy within shared expenses. This all sounds perfectly reasonable, Marco said as we concluded the discussion. And I appreciate how thoughtfully you've approached this. It makes me even more confident that we're building something sustainable. That word, sustainable, resonated deeply. What we were creating wasn't based on intensity mistaken for intimacy or strategic vulnerability designed to accelerate commitment. It was built on authentic communication, mutual respect, and genuine appreciation for each other as complete individuals choosing partnership rather than incomplete half-seeking wholeness. 2 months later, as we unpacked Marco's carefully labeled boxes in what was now our shared apartment, I reflected on the journey that had brought me to this point. The betrayal that had seemed devastating in the moment had ultimately served as catalyst for growth and recalibration that might otherwise have taken years to achieve, if it had happened at all. Tyler had thought I would crumble when he left me for Amber. He hadn't expected what I sent to her inbox, the calm, factual evidence that allowed her to make an informed decision about the man she was involving herself with. And neither of them had anticipated how that moment of strategic truth rather than emotional drama would set the tone for everything that followed, leading to consequences for their choices and opportunities for my own renewal. As Marco arranged his cookbooks alongside mine on the kitchen shelves, integrating our collections while maintaining individual sections for specialties, I felt a profound gratitude for the path that had led me here. Not because the pain had been necessary or the betrayal somehow beneficial, but because I had found the strength to respond to difficulty with dignity, to prioritize truth over drama, and to rebuild based on authentic values rather than reactive emotions. Perfect fit, Marco observed, stepping back to admire our newly combined library of culinary inspiration. I smiled, recognizing that he was right in more ways than he had intended. This relationship, this partnership, this carefully considered merging of lives, it was indeed a perfect fit. Not because we were identical or because our differences disappeared, but because we had each done the individual work necessary to approach connection from a place of wholeness rather than need. Tyler had thought I'd cry when he left me for her. He didn't expect what I sent to her inbox, and neither of us could have imagined that his attempt to hurt me would ultimately lead me to a life more aligned with my authentic self than I might ever have created had the betrayal never occurred. In the end, the greatest revelation wasn't about Tyler or Amber or even the specific events that had unfolded. It was about my own capacity to transform painful experience into meaningful growth, to choose dignity over drama, and to build a life characterized by genuine connection rather than strategic management. He thought I'd cry when he left me for her. Instead, I found my voice, my boundaries, and ultimately, my way forward into a life that would have been unimaginable had I responded with the emotional devastation he had so confidently expected.